Notice NVIDIA was up $1.80, and now it's like barely up. What is that? Now it's down.
What do you make of that?
Taiwan Semi's down very big. Well, I make as much of that as I make about the fact that Alphabet was up big. NVIDIA's problematic here because it doesn't report this week, so it can't speak for itself.
It's the 21st, I believe.
Yeah.
Although last week, Jim, that JP Morgan desk note looking at SK Hynix and Taiwan Semi and arguing it does set up NVIDIA for a nice print.
I think NVIDIA's going to have a big number. I also thought that there was much more to Jensen Huang's fireside chat in India. And when you look at what he was talking about, it's pretty positive. But right now, it doesn't have the catalyst that the others have. But there are, I have HPE on this week. Hewlett Packard Enterprises. Today, I have to tell you.
Oh, you got Antonio tonight? Yeah.
He's very good, and I underestimated how great he is initially. But his story is about how he works so well with NVIDIA, and NVIDIA needs help to get in. So, but anyway, I mean, right now, NVIDIA doesn't have the catalyst, so.
No, other than Jensen is everywhere all the time, all at once. I mean,
he's amazing.
Is there any podcast he hasn't been on yet?
Was he on Joe Rogan?
I don't know. Has he not been on Joe Rogan?
Maybe.
I don't know.
He does make himself available, which is nice.
Jason Kelsey?
They have a podcast, right?
Top rated.
He hasn't been on with them either?
I drink Campbell's soup because Jason Kelsey.
Oh, you do? You're
you're
easily influenced.
Of course.
Yeah.
Whatever I see last, I buy.
That's true. Whatever thought in your head was last is what you tell us.
Touche.
Queens, Philadelphia. There it is, right there, right? Mets beat Phillies.
We also continue to monitor the market cap battle between NVIDIA and Apple. Let's unpack the chip sector further with Bernstein semiconductor analyst Stacy Rasgon. Stacy, it's great to see you. NVIDIA doesn't report until late-ish November, but of course we have so many signals this week, right? With CapEx from some of the Mag 7. What do they need to show us to keep the NVIDIA party going?
Look, they just need to show us that demand is there and strong and ideally growing, right? I mean, the big concern there's a number of concerns when anything runs this much, but I mean, the biggest concern has just been sustainability. Like the numbers have gotten so big so quickly, you just worry that it can't keep going. And like as of right now, from everything we can see, it looks like it's still going. Like I get the nervousness. It clearly is not time to worry this year. I don't even think it's time to worry next year. We'll see as we go farther out. But I think at this point, they just need to show that demand is strong and growing and accelerating. And at least from where we're standing right now, everything we can see, things look pretty good, I think.
Right. Stacey, I want to ask you about the story that Seema was just talking about, and that is the idea that Trump especially, but perhaps both candidates would crack down on manufacturing of chips inside of the U.S. But what we've seen from TSMC versus what we haven't seen from Intel, sort of talk about that and what it would mean if TSMC wasn't able to ramp up here in the United States.
Look, I'll be honest. So I heard Trump's comments as well, and he was. What did he say on Rogan? He said he didn't like the CHIPS Act. He wanted to replace it with tariffs. Yeah. I mean, it makes it's Trump, so Trump is gonna Trump, but it doesn't make any sense, right? The idea that like Taiwan has stolen, quote unquote, our chip making abilities is ridiculous. Like that is not true, and like not allowing foreign companies to make chips on U.S. soil. That is actually what we want. I mean, look the whole the idea that we are dependent on Taiwan and that is becoming increasingly an untenable situation is very true. And, we want to get leading edge infrastructure built here in the U.S. And to be honest, from a policy standpoint, it really shouldn't be mattering all that much who is building it. I understand why Intel is sort of named the national champion, but if the goal is really to get as much leading edge capacity built here as quickly as possible, we should be giving the money to the folks who can build it. And as of right now, that entity is TSMC. And you're right, there was some news flow of last week that suggested that their yield ramp in Arizona is actually exceeding targets and maybe even exceeding what they do in Taiwan. There are no other players, neither Intel nor Samsung, that can make claims that are anywhere near that. So if the goal is to build the capacity and get it here and installed and running in the U.S. to de-risk the supply chain, that's happening right now. And so stopping that would be a problem, sure.
Have we given up on Intel then?
Well, we'll see. They report earnings on Thursday. I guess we'll see what they have to say. But I mean, clearly, Intel's core business is under pressure. They're losing share, and they can't rely on their own manufacturing right now. So they're actually outsourcing more, which is impacting gross margins and everything like that. So their suggestion is that they believe their process rollback over time is getting fixed. They're going to bring that volume back into the U.S. and it's going to make everything wonderful. I guess we'll see. They had a day a few months ago where they were sort of giving out some targets for where they thought things could go over time, and it really was like a 2030 story, right? Even if they are on track, like it's a slog between now and when we would actually see things really start to improve. And as of right now, we don't actually know if they're truly improving or not. So strap in for Thursday, I guess. It'll be entertaining, if nothing else, I'm sure.
Yeah, so we're not going to get NVIDIA for a little bit, Stacy, but every so often you hear, and I'm sure you do it more than I do, well, there's, a small company over here that's developing a next generation chip that's going to ultimately disintermediate or push NVIDIA to the side. I mean, how long is their dominance, do you think, going to last?
Well, I mean, there's always somebody in the wings. That this is an enormous market, right? The idea that there's not going to be others trying to take a piece of that pie is ridiculous. Of course they are. Now, that being said, like NVIDIA's built up their position in silicon and hardware and software and systems and ecosystem over 10 or 20 years, right? And they've put those moats into place. And so anybody that is trying to get in there, and I'm not talking that people can't get little bits. Clearly, AMD and others are getting little bits, but to be like material in that market, you've got to like penetrate those moats, and it's a very, very difficult thing to do. And especially for a startup, I mean, when you just look at the amount of money that NVIDIA has to invest in these things versus smaller, very small companies, it's tough. It's very, very tough. So at this point, I'm not terribly worried about some like young upstart coming in and taking a massive amount of NVIDIA. So I'm not even really that worried about larger companies, larger competitors going in and trying to take doesn't seem to be impacting them very much right now.
Maybe bits and pieces. That tracks with what I hear from tech investors in San Francisco as well. Be interesting to see Cerebras go public. Stacy, Rasgon, thanks as always for your insights. Right, last quarter, though, we saw the market a little bit skittish, not a little, very skittish, actually, around their spending plans. CapEx continues to go up as they build out artificial intelligence infrastructure. What do investors want to see this quarter?
Investors want to see less spending on CapEx, but the challenge is they can't stop. And so we had about $106.2 billion in CapEx spending in the first half of the year, and we're expecting another $60 billion in Q3. Taking out the year to $231 billion in CapEx spending. And that means the big winner is going to be NVIDIA, the big winner is going to be energy companies on the other end. However, given that it's so hard to compete on AI and cloud, this is really what gives them the advantage. That's why there's only a few winners in this play. And so what investors are hoping for is slower CapEx spending and, of course, more returns on the AI and more returns on the cloud side.
All right, I hope you're all doing great today. The S&P finished the day up by about 0.3%, and NVIDIA finished the day down about 0.7%. This week and next week are both very important to the market's mega cap tech and NVIDIA. This week, we get earnings from most of the Mag 7, which is extremely important to NVIDIA since these companies are some of NVIDIA's largest customers. On Tuesday, we get earnings from Alphabet. Then on Wednesday, both Microsoft and Meta report. And then we get both Amazon and Apple earnings on Thursday. Then next week, we have the election and the next FOMC meeting. Keep in mind that FOMC next week has been pushed back by one day due to the election on Tuesday. We normally get the Fed's interest rate decision and Powell's press conference on Wednesdays. But next week it will be on Thursday due to the election. Now back to this week. When it comes to NVIDIA, the main thing we want to hear from the hyperscalers is increased guidance on CapEx spending, and we also want the hyperscalers to tell investors that they're seeing increasing AI demand from customers. If both of those prove to be true, then that clears the way for NVIDIA to move higher ahead of NVIDIA's next earnings report. Now here's the dilemma in the short term. If the hyperscalers report that they are increasing CapEx, then that could cause their stocks to trade lower in the short term, which would likely weigh down on NVIDIA in the immediate short term. But of course, even if that happens in the short term, increasing CapEx from the hyperscalers is very good news for the long-term future of NVIDIA. I think once we get into early November, NVIDIA is likely to trade higher ahead of earnings on the 20th due to Micron's great earnings, TSMC's great earnings that showed revenue growth acceleration, and because multiple NVIDIA customers have confirmed that they're already receiving shipments of Blackwell. I think NVIDIA is likely to report a great quarter and increase forward-looking guidance for Blackwell revenue. Now let me briefly mention something about the market as a whole. I want to remind you that if we get a dip this week in the broader market, do do not panic. It is very typical for the market to trade lower during the week before a major election and then trade higher during the actual week of the election. That being said, I am genuinely surprised by how well the market has held up over the past couple weeks. At this point, I'm not sure if we will get a dip or not. But if you see the market trading lower later this week, do not freak out, because it will most likely be a temporary dip before the market moves higher into year-end. This is, of course, assuming that nothing unexpected happens in the world between now and year-end. As I mentioned in my last video, if we get a dip that extends in a Friday of this week, then I would likely use that as a buying opportunity. Back in 2016 and 2020, we got a dip that lasted into the Friday before election week, and then the market rallied during the actual week of the election. With this in mind, if we get a dip this week that extends in a Friday, then I would likely use that as an opportunity to buy a swing trade position in some SPY calls that I would hold into the week of the election. I'm not telling you to take that trade. I'm just saying that that is something I'm watching. But we have to wait and see if we get a dip first before I would consider taking that trade. As for NVIDIA, remember that the next AI summit is scheduled for November 12th through the 13th in Tokyo, and CEO Jensen Huang is scheduled to speak on November 13th. I expect Jensen to speak in more generalities regarding AI and NVIDIA at this AI summit, and I do not expect Jensen to mention many specifics about the production ramp of Blackwell or demand for Blackwell. This is because NVIDIA will be in a quiet period ahead of their earnings report on November 20th. NVIDIA takes these quiet periods very seriously, and so I would be surprised if Jensen were to say much about the demand for Blackwell at this AI summit. But we will see what happens. Regardless of what happens in the short term, I am bullish on the long-term future of NVIDIA, and I think the company's brightest days are ahead. Demand for NVIDIA's products is insane. NVIDIA has such a massive competitive moat and holistic ecosystem, and so they don't have to worry about competitors anytime soon. And we have a clear product roadmap from NVIDIA for the next 2 years. This year, we get the launch of Blackwell, then Blackwell Ultra in 2025, and later on we get Rubin in 2026. I genuinely would not be surprised if this company doubles over the next 2 years, given NVIDIA's current growth trajectory and upcoming product cycles. As long as everything remains peaceful in the Pacific, and as long as none of the hyperscalers significantly reduce their capex spending on AI, then I think NVIDIA should be just fine for at least the next 1 to 2 years. At least that's how I see it. With all of that being said, I hope you all have a great start to the week, and I'm curious to hear your thoughts about NVIDIA in the comments below. Please leave a like on this video so more people will see it. And while you're down there, please consider subscribing. It's free, and you can always change your mind. Thanks for watching, and hopefully I'll see you in the next video.